My name is Helen Lowry. I'm 67 years old. I used to be a registered nurse. 3 decades of stitching wounds, reading heartbeats, holding hands through last breaths. Now, I mostly water my orchids and refill my pillbox on Sundays. I live alone. Not because I want to, but because I've learned to. That afternoon, I stood in the middle of my daughter's living room, holding a slice of cake I didn't want and wearing a smile I didn't mean. Colorful balloons floated above me. People I barely knew sipped sangria and complimented the decor like they were attending a charity gala. It was Alexa's 8th birthday. My granddaughter, my only grandchild, my favorite heartbeat. She wore a lilac dress with silver ribbons and had just finished unwrapping the Lego architecture set I got her. I saved for months to buy it. Her eyes had lit up like they used to when she was 3, when she'd sit on my lap and ask if I used to be a superhero because nurses wore capes in her dreams. Then she tugged on my skirt. She didn't look up, just pretended to fix the hem. And in the softest voice I've ever heard from a child, she said, "Grandma, my parents are going to take your money after the party today." I blinked. The slice of cake on my plate suddenly looked like it belonged to someone else's party. The music dimmed in my ears. My fingers tightened around the fork as if it could anchor me. My heartbeat didn't race. It steadied. It steadied in that awful, surgical way it used to when a trauma patient was about to crash. Alexa was still pretending to play with her dress. I bent down slightly and whispered, "Sweetheart, can you tell me what you heard?" She didn't respond, just looked up and gave me a quick, nervous nod, like a soldier who had passed along a warning and needed to vanish before the war exploded. I straightened up and looked around the room. Samantha, my daughter, was across the room pouring wine into stemless glasses like a woman hosting a book club. Brandon, her husband, was laughing too loud at a joke no one else heard. Everyone was busy pretending that this was a family gathering. But I knew better. This wasn't a celebration. It was a setup. So I did something they didn't expect. I left. I set the plate on the side table, walked to the front door, and picked up my purse. Nobody noticed at first. Then someone called out, "Helen, are you okay?" I smiled. A tight, grandmotherly smile. "I'm just feeling a little tired. I think I'll head out early." No one followed me. No one insisted I stay. I stepped outside. The afternoon sun hit my skin like the first breath after surgery. Warm, honest, real. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just kept walking. Because when your 8-year-old granddaughter tells you that her parents are planning to rob you, you don't wait around for cake. You walk out, and you plan. I drove home with my hands steady on the wheel, the kind of steadiness that comes when the truth finally stops whispering and starts screaming. They were going to take everything. They thought I was too soft, too old, too alone. But they had forgotten one thing. I might be 67. I might live alone. But I built my entire life learning how to spot a silent emergency. And I'd just heard the biggest one of my life, whispered through the trembling voice of the only person left in this family who truly sees me. They didn't know what I'd do next. But I promise you, what I did after that party shocked everyone. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel weak. I felt ready. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when every knock at the door meant someone needed me. A time when my name echoed from bedrooms at night, when fevers rose or nightmares pulled tiny bodies from sleep. Back then, I was Mama. I was the one who knew where the batteries were, how to make soup with nothing, how to press a cool cloth to a crying forehead without saying a word. I was their certainty, their compass, their warmth. Samantha used to sit on the bathroom counter, swinging her legs while I took off my nurse's cap. She'd ask me what I fixed that day, who I saved, who I helped, whether I wore gloves or just my magic hands. I told her once that healing wasn't always about medicine. Sometimes it was just being there, listening, holding the silence without fear. Back then, she used to believe me. My husband, Lester, was the kind of man who spoke with his hands, mostly through the garden, through the old truck he swore would outlive us. He didn't say much, but when he looked at me across a dinner table full of mismatched plates and overcooked beans, I knew I mattered. We didn't have much, but we had rhythm, and that rhythm was a kind of wealth. When Lester got sick, everything shifted. Pancreatic cancer doesn't ask permission. It just moves in, rearranges the furniture, and leaves grief scattered across your floors. I quit the hospital to take care of him. No hesitation, no second thought. 6 months later, he was gone, and I was still holding the silence. But this time, it was cold. After the funeral, Samantha cried into my chest and said, "We'll take care of you now, Mom." I nodded. I wanted to believe her, but promises spoken at grave sites often don't survive the distance back home. At first, she'd call every Sunday. She'd bring Alexa over to draw pictures and eat my ginger cookies. She'd ask how I was sleeping, if I was eating, if I was lonely. I told her the truth. I was adjusting. Then, one Sunday became every other. Then, only holidays. Then, only when money was tight. The first time she asked for help was for Alexa's school fees. "It's a STEM program, Mom. She's gifted. You wouldn't want her to miss out, would you?" Of course I wouldn't. Then came the refrigerator, the car repair, the mortgage cosign, always with soft tones and quick assurances. "It's temporary. We'll pay you back. You're our safety net, Mom." But nets don't last forever, especially when no one patches the holes. I didn't mind, at first. What use is savings when your only grandchild might need braces or books or violin lessons? What else would I spend it on? But somewhere along the way, I stopped being the strong woman who raised them. I became the backup plan. Then the burden. Then the woman who should consider downsizing. There's something strange about watching your role in the family fade, not with cruelty, but with careful management. One day you realize you've become the guest in your own bloodline. They never said it aloud, but their eyes told me, at every visit, every sideways glance at my still-standing house, every time Brandon said, "Must be hard keeping this place up alone," I'd smile, pretend I didn't notice, pretend I didn't know that when a mother stops being needed, she starts being inconvenient. So I kept showing up, with gifts, with food, with quiet, until the day Alexa pulled at my skirt and told me the truth. And just like that, all the years of pretending folded themselves into one sharp moment. They thought I was weak because I didn't argue. But they misunderstood me. I didn't stay quiet because I was afraid. I stayed quiet because I was watching. And now, I had seen enough. The first time Samantha mentioned assisted living, she said it like a compliment. We were sitting at her kitchen table. It was the kind of spring day that used to mean iced tea and open windows. But that afternoon, the air inside her house felt tight, like someone had closed every vent. Alexa was upstairs watching cartoons. Brandon was in the garage, pretending to fix something. Samantha poured me a cup of herbal tea I didn't ask for. She smiled, too wide. Then she said, Mom, there's this beautiful community near Lakeview. One of my friends just moved her mother in, and she says it's changed their lives. I stirred my tea, slowly, didn't speak. She went on. They have yoga classes, a library, even a shuttle for appointments. It's not like those places you think about. It's modern, kind. Kind. That word tasted like manipulation. I kept stirring. She kept smiling. And somewhere between her description of the meal plan and the on-site salon, I realized she was trying to sell me something. Not a place, an idea, that my independence had an expiration date, and that it had just passed. I remember looking at her hands, French manicure, gold band glinting under the fluorescent light. She hadn't worn her wedding ring for the first 3 years of her marriage, said it didn't match her style, but now she wore it like a badge, like permanence. I used to hold those hands when she had nightmares, when her fever spiked, when she begged me not to make her go to school. Now they were the hands pointing me gently, efficiently, toward the door of my own life. I told her I'd think about it. She looked pleased. That was her mistake, because when I say I'll think, I do, not emotionally, but thoroughly. That night, I sat in my recliner with a yellow legal pad. I made 2 columns. Left, what I can still do. Right, what they think I can't. The left side filled quickly. Cook, drive, budget, read, walk, remember, decide. The right side stayed mostly empty until I wrote 1 word. Resist. They didn't think I could resist. A week later, Brandon stopped by my house. Unannounced. He said he was in the area. I offered him coffee. He declined, but walked through every room like he was appraising it for resale. This place is holding up well, he said, tapping on the kitchen counter. You ever think about getting a smaller place? Something easier? Easier for who? I asked. He smiled, didn't answer. Then he said something that stuck in my throat for days. Helen, you've got a lot of space here for just 1 person. I looked at him, square in the face, and I saw it, just a flicker, something dark behind the politeness. He didn't mean I had space. He meant I had assets. I walked him to the door, locked it behind him, then sat at the dining table and wrote in my notebook, "They're not asking me to leave. They're preparing the world for why it makes sense that I should." That was the beginning of the slow betrayal. Not a knife in the back, just little nudges toward the edge. A gentle push here, a kind word there. It's the sort of betrayal that doesn't bleed. It erodes. And the cruelest part? They do it with love in their voice, as if manipulation sounds softer when it's sung like a lullaby. But I was wide awake now, and I was done being managed. I've kept a ledger in my mind for years, not for the money. I never needed a calculator to remember what left my account. I kept track of something else. How many times I said yes, and how rarely they said thank you. The first yes came when Samantha called crying at 10:42 p.m. Alexa was 2. Brandon's job had fallen through. We're 3 weeks behind on rent, Mom. I don't know what to do. I wired them enough to cover 2 months. I remember the relief in her voice, but I don't remember a thank you, not the kind that lands in the chest and stays. Later, it was Alexa's preschool fees, some enrichment program with wooden toys and foreign languages. Mom, she's so smart. This school could change her future. I paid the tuition for the first year, quietly. Then came the down payment on their house. Brandon had found a great deal in a developing neighborhood. They needed a co-signer, and an extra $25,000. I took it from the CD Lester, and I had planned for emergencies. Turns out, I just never realized who the emergency would be. They brought me a bottle of wine as a thank you gift, a brand I didn't like, still unopened on my pantry shelf. After that, it blurred. New tires, a transmission rebuild, private, music lessons, groceries, health insurance premiums, even a weekend getaway for their mental health. Each time, it came wrapped in some version of just until we catch our breath, or we hate asking, but it's just this once. And each time, I gave. Because what kind of mother says no to her child when her child is falling apart? But the truth is, Samantha wasn't falling apart. She was floating on the belief that I would always be the net. And when people believe a net will never break, they stop checking for holes. I never asked for anything back. Not because I didn't need it, but because I knew asking would feel like begging for validation. And I didn't want love that had to be earned with invoices. Still, there were moments when I waited, moments when I thought, maybe this time. After Alexa's school recital, after Samantha got promoted, after they refinanced the house, I'd sit across from them, waiting for a look, a squeeze of the hand, a whisper in the hallway. Something real, something that said, "You held us together, Mom. We haven't forgotten." But it never came. They said, "Thank you, yes." But it always came with a time limit, a glance at the phone, a car engine running outside, a text message buzzing mid-sentence. Not one word ever reached the place in me where I had to silence my own needs to fund theirs. I don't think they meant harm. I truly don't. That's what makes it harder. It wasn't hatred. It was habit. I was the woman who would always say yes. So why honor a gift you expected? You don't thank the sun for rising. You just assume it will. But that day, after Alexa whispered the truth at her own birthday party, I realized something vital. They'd stopped seeing me as a person. I was now a resource, a name on property titles, a signature on loan documents, a monthly transfer notification. And the worst part? I had let them. Because love taught me to give. But it never taught them when to stop taking. They told me Alexa wanted a music box. She saw one on TikTok, Samantha had said, almost dismissively, like it was a phase, like she'd forget in a week. But I didn't forget. For weeks, I searched online, going down rabbit holes of vintage sellers, Etsy shops, and secondhand collectors. Not just any music box. I was looking for one that played Claire de Lune. Alexa used to sway to that tune as a toddler, barely steady on her feet, holding my fingers like little tree branches. It took 10 days to find the right one. Cherry wood, hand-carved ballerina, delicate etching on the lid. To the girl who still dances when no one's watching. I don't know if Alexa does still dance, but I wanted her to remember that she once did. The night before her birthday party, I laid the music box on my bed and opened it slowly. The ballerina twirled. The tune spilled into my room like warm molasses. I sat beside it, letting the sound fill the silence I'd been dragging around all week. And then I wrote the card. It took me 3 tries. The first version sounded too formal. The second, too emotional. On the third, I settled for simple. Alexa, may you always move through life with grace, even when the music changes. Love you, Grandma H. I folded the card, slipped it under the ribbon, and tied the box shut. Then I ran my fingers along the edges, checking, double-checking, like I used to do with her baby blanket, making sure it was tucked in tight. There was a time when preparing for her birthday was the highlight of my year, planning treasure hunts in the backyard, baking three-tier cakes with pink frosting, staying up till 2 a.m. just to make handmade party hats with glitter that never came off. I used to wake up smiling on Alexa's birthday, but this year, I woke up with a stone in my chest. I couldn't name it, but it was there. Heavy quiet. A weight that pressed down harder every time I remembered Brandon's words from last week. "You've got a lot of space here for just one person." Or Samantha's nervous smile when I offered to bring homemade cupcakes. "Oh, actually, we're doing store-bought this time. Just easier, you know?" Easier. That word again. As if my presence, my touch, my care was somehow becoming inconvenient. Still, I dressed carefully that morning. Navy blue blouse. Alexa said it brought out my eyes. Small gold earrings, ones she liked to play with as a toddler. A scarf with birds on it. She used to name each bird, tapping them with her finger. "That one's me. That one's you, Grandma. We're flying to the moon." I stared at myself in the mirror, smiled, practiced it twice, then picked up the gift box. It felt heavier than it should, but I held it close. As I stepped outside, I remember whispering to myself, "Please let this day be soft." I didn't need a parade, just a moment. Just one look from her eyes that told me she remembered who I was. Not the bank, not the background. Grandma. I got in the car and started the engine. The box sat on the passenger seat, gleaming in the morning sun. I tried not to think too hard, not to let my mind wander to that yellow legal pad still sitting on my dining table, not to revisit every easy that had replaced my name, not to ask myself why I suddenly felt like a guest in their lives instead of family. I just wanted to see my granddaughter smile and to believe, just for a few hours, that my love was still something they welcomed. But the closer I got to their house, the heavier that box felt. Not physically, emotionally. It carried more than a song. It carried everything I hadn't said. Dorothy was standing by her hydrangeas when I pulled into the driveway. Wide-brimmed hat, red lipstick even at 9 in the morning, always dressed like she was on her way to brunch with the Queen. She waved at me the way she always did. 2 fingers, slight tilt of the chin, as if we were in some slow-motion movie. I got out of the car, holding Alexa's gift in both hands. "Helen, honey, you look lovely," she called out. "Heading to the little one's party?" I nodded, careful not to smile too much. There was always a risk that smiles might crack something inside if held too long. She glanced at the box. "That's a big package for a little girl." I chuckled softly. "Music box." She saw one online. Took me a while to find the right one. Dorothy leaned over the fence slightly. Then her tone changed, just a notch. That low, curious drop in pitch that meant something else was coming. "I saw Samantha and Brandon yesterday," she said, plucking a brown leaf off the bush with precision. "They were walking into the Wells Fargo, downtown, around lunchtime. Looked formal." My fingers tightened around the ribbon of the gift. "Formal?" I echoed. She nodded, not missing a beat. Brandon was in a blazer. Samantha wore heels. You know, the kind of look people wear when they're signing something. Documents. Maybe a refinance? My mouth went dry. Dorothy wasn't being malicious. She wasn't the gossiping type. She was just observant. Always had been. Like the day after Lester's funeral. She was the one who noticed I hadn't eaten in 2 days and showed up with a pot roast. She noticed things others didn't. "They looked in a rush," she continued. "Didn't stop to chat. Just gave me a wave and kept going." I tried to brush it off. Oh, maybe something with the mortgage or Alexa's school account. Dorothy tilted her head. Maybe. Or maybe they're making some future plans. You know how kids are these days. Everything has to be signed, filed, notarized. She meant it as a throwaway comment, a line to fill the silence, but it stuck to me like damp cotton. As I pulled back into the road, my hands gripped the wheel tighter than before. My mind was no longer on Alexa's gift. It was on the will, on the estate, on the trust Lester and I had set up before his cancer reached his spine. Brandon knew I never changed the structure after his father died. They both knew. Because I'd been transparent. Too transparent. I told them what the lawyer told me, that if anything happened, the house and assets would be transferred to me first, and only after my passing, divided equally. Safe. Simple. Fair. But lately, the way Samantha kept mentioning ease, the way Brandon talked about downsizing, were they trying to accelerate something? Had they gone to the bank with my name in their briefcase? I shook the thought away, told myself not to be paranoid, but it stuck. Not as an accusation, but as a crack, a hairline fracture in a wall I thought was solid. It doesn't take a sledgehammer to bring something down. Sometimes it just takes time. And a pen. By the time I reached their house, I had already decided two things. I would not bring it up today. Not at Alexa's party. I would watch everything more closely from now on. Because sometimes the truth doesn't slap you in the face. Sometimes it whispers across the fence in the voice of a neighbor. As I walked up the steps, I told myself again, let the day be soft. But the gift in my arms wasn't the only thing heavy anymore. Now, suspicion was sitting right there beside it, silent, but very, very alive. The front yard was picture perfect. Balloons in pastel pink and cream arched over the porch. A handmade sign read, "Happy 8th birthday, Alexa," with glittery letters that caught the sunlight just so. Someone had clearly hired a party planner, the kind I never could have afforded when Brandon was Alexa's age. Back then, birthdays meant sponge cake from scratch and streamers, taped to walls that peeled the paint. Now, there were folding chairs in neat rows, matching tablecloths, name tags on glasses. Even the lemonade was infused with rosemary. I stepped onto the porch, with Alexa's gift nestled in my arms, like something sacred. As soon as the front door opened, I was met by Samantha's voice, syrupy sweet, too high-pitched. "Helen, oh, you made it. You look amazing." She leaned in with an air kiss. One cheek, not two. And before I could respond, her hands were already on the box. "Let me take that for you," she said, her nails clicking against the ribbon. I held on for a second longer than necessary. "No, thank you. I'll give it to Alexa myself." Her smile froze for a blink too long. Then came Brandon, arms wide, voice booming like he'd just seen a long-lost cousin. "Mom, you didn't have to dress up like this." I gave a quiet nod. "It's Alexa's day." He clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard, and guided me toward the backyard. The backyard was full of laughter, children running in circles, their giggles bubbling into the air like effervescence, parents chatting near the grill, a clown making balloon animals, and Alexa, dressed like a woodland fairy, wings and all. She looked up and saw me, ran over, but didn't hug me. Instead, she said, "Did you bring it?" Eyes locked on the box. I smiled and handed it over. When she opened it, the ballerina spun, and for a brief moment, her eyes lit up. "Oh, it's like the video," she said, grinning. I watched her fingers graze the lid. Then she turned and ran off to show her friends. not once looking back. I whispered, "You're welcome," to no one in particular. As I walked around, people greeted me like I was the guest of honor, too enthusiastically. Too many compliments about my hair, my scarf, how youthful I looked. It wasn't flattery. It was selling. Even Brandon came over with a cup of lemonade, offering it like a peace offering. He hadn't brought me a glass in years. And Samantha? She introduced me to every guest in earshot. "This is Helen, Brandon's mom. She's the rock of this family. Raised him on her own after Lester passed." I'd heard that tone before. The "build her up so she gives you what you want" tone. They were setting the stage, dressing me up for display. I wasn't a guest. I was a proposal. Then came the clincher. An older couple I didn't recognize walked over. Samantha beamed at them. "Oh, Helen! This is Ted and Marianne. They've just moved here from Arizona. Brandon was telling them all about the lake house." I blinked. "The what?" Samantha's eyes widened. "Oh, the dream we keep talking about, remember? The retirement lake house idea we've been throwing around for you." Ted smiled. "Sounds like quite the plan. A little place near water. He says it'd be perfect for you. Quiet, safe, manageable." My throat tightened. I had never agreed to such a plan. They were pitching me, right in front of me, as if I weren't even in the room. I stood there, holding my empty glass, my smile slowly retreating. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't a party. It was a stage. And I was the product. Wrapped in politeness, labeled with nostalgia, priced in inheritance. But I said nothing. I smiled. I nodded, and I started to listen closer, to memorize the way they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching, to note which guests kept glancing at me like I was part of a transaction. They thought they were playing chess, but I was already learning the board. After the cake had been cut and Alexa's fingers were stained pink with frosting, she came running back to me, barefoot and wind-kissed, her cheeks flushed from the chase of childhood. She held something behind her back. "Grandma," she sang, breathless, "I made you something. I did it in art class with Mrs. Penner, but I saved it for today." I felt something warm unfurl in my chest. "You made this for me?" She nodded, pulled it out, and handed it over like it was treasure. It was a drawing. Crayons. Thick, bold lines. The kind kids use when they're proud. There were 4 figures standing in front of a bright yellow house. Brandon, Samantha, Alexa, and a dog, Tilly, their golden retriever. They were holding hands. And just to the right, outside a little wooden fence, there I was. Smaller. Gray hair, a cane, even though I didn't use one. And no one holding my hand. Just me, standing behind the fence, alone. My smile froze. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," I whispered. "Can you tell me about it?" Alexa beamed. "That's our house. Mommy, Daddy, me, and Tilly. And that's you, Grandma. You're next door, like Mommy said, so you don't have to climb stairs. See? That's your little house. Back here." She pointed to a tiny square behind the yard, almost like a shed. Then she added cheerfully, "And the fence is so you don't get lonely, but also don't get tired. Mommy says you like peace." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because. What else could I do? It wasn't Alexa's fault. She was just mirroring what she'd been told, what she'd overheard, what had been whispered behind closed doors, but soaked into her like sunlight through curtains. They were already writing me out, gently, sweetly, deliberately. I looked at the drawing again. The fence wasn't tall, but it was there. A line. A decision. a future being mapped without my input. And that little version of me, alone, smiling faintly, cane in hand, felt more accurate than I wanted to admit. "Do you like it?" Alexa asked again. "I do," I said softly, brushing her hair back. "I love how you made the sun so big. It makes everything look warm." She smiled and skipped away. And I sat there, the drawing on my lap, pretending to sip the lemonade that had long gone warm. I couldn't stop staring at that crayon fence. It wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was accepted. A soft pastel boundary that said, "You're not bad. You're just not us." I folded the drawing carefully and slipped it into my purse. Not to keep it as a gift, but as evidence. Proof. That even in the safest language, exclusion had a shape. And mine had been drawn in yellow and brown crayon. Later that night, after the guests began leaving, and Brandon was walking people out, I caught Samantha glancing toward me as she whispered something to her sister. They both laughed. Not unkindly, just like I wasn't there. And for the first time, I realized, maybe in their minds, I wasn't. I had become decorative, useful in nostalgia, but inconvenient in presence. And that was when I knew. Alexa's drawing wasn't a mistake. It was a mirror. The party was beginning to dim, not in volume, but in light. The late afternoon sun had started its slow slide behind the magnolia trees. Laughter echoed from the back porch where Brandon was opening another bottle of wine. Paper plates scattered. Candles flickered, not for mood, but to fight mosquitoes. And I sat there, invisible again, until I felt a tug. "Grandma," Alexa whispered. Her little hand was warm, insistent. She looked over her shoulder quickly, then again, then pulled me. "Come here, I want to show you something." We slipped past the sliding door into the hallway. The house dimmer, cooler. I thought she was going to show me her new birthday presents. Instead, she stopped beside the coat closet, closed the door behind us. And in the hush, in that tiny pocket of silence where the world seemed to hold its breath, she said, "Mommy said you're too old to hold money. Daddy said after today you won't have to worry about anything ever again." It didn't hit like thunder. It landed, softly, a snowfall of realization that chilled me all the way through. "I don't understand, sweetheart," I murmured, crouching down. Alexa looked confused too, like she was torn between fear and loyalty. "They said, you forget things, that you don't need that much money, and that Miss Natalie at the bank already made the papers ready." She paused. "I think it's about your house money, Grandma. The one from Grandpa." The floor felt further away than it was. Not because I was dizzy, but because everything in me began to shift. A quiet snap, like a lock turning. I forced a smile. "Thank you for telling me, Lexi." She blinked. "Am I in trouble?" I shook my head. "No, you're the only one being honest with me today." She hugged me tight, then ran off, back into the safe, noisy world of cake and music and gift bags. I stayed in the closet for a few seconds longer, not because I was scared, but because I needed silence. I needed clarity. And in that silence, I remembered the conversation from last week. Samantha. "Mom, have you thought about simplifying your finances? It's just easier if something happens suddenly." Brandon. "Helen, it's about peace of mind. You're generous, sure, but maybe you need protection too." At the time, I'd laughed it off. But now, I realized. They weren't worried about protecting me. They were positioning themselves to inherit early, without waiting for nature to do its work. My late husband Lester had left me the house and a quiet fortune from our vineyard shares, hidden in plain sight. I'd never flaunted it, never upgraded my wardrobe or car, but they knew, and they wanted it now. Before I got confused, before I started making mistakes, before I remembered who I used to be, I stepped out of the hallway. The air was louder. People were dancing now. The kind of dancing that looked forced, but photographed well. I moved through the room like a ghost with purpose. No one noticed. No one ever did. Until I picked up my purse and slipped out the back door. No goodbyes. No fuss. Because if what Alexa said was true, then the contract would be presented tonight. The legal shift would happen after dessert. And I wouldn't be there for it. The stars hadn't risen yet, but I walked into the blue twilight as if I could already feel their light. They thought they were managing an elderly woman. But I was Helen, and I hadn't forgotten who I was. I didn't slam the door when I left. Didn't even close it with force. Just a soft click. But it echoed louder in my chest than any scream could have. The gravel crunched under my sandals. Evening bugs chirped in rhythm like an old lullaby. And as I walked toward the car parked down the street, I didn't turn back once. The drive home took 11 minutes, but in those minutes, I aged backwards, not forward. Back into someone I had once been. Someone Lester once trusted with his name. And more importantly, his silence. The house welcomed me like an old friend who knows what not to ask. No judgment in the creaking floorboards. No pity in the ticking of the clock. I moved with purpose. Straight to the bedroom. Opened the top drawer of the old mahogany dresser. Removed the satin pouch beneath the folded scarves. Inside was the key. To the small iron safe tucked behind the coats in the linen closet. The one Samantha used to hide in as a child during hide and seek. She never asked what was behind the wood paneling. I never told her. Some doors, once opened, cannot be shut again. It took both hands to turn the dial, my fingers stiff, but memory still sharp. Ing to the left, 4 to the right, back to 36. The lock gave a satisfying clunk, and there it was, the folder Lester had labeled Trust and Instructions, in the event of premature inheritance attempts. He had joked once, "If they ever get too eager, Helen, make sure this goes to Lucinda, not the court." At the time, I laughed, but Lester knew our children's patterns better than I did. He saw how Samantha counted dollars like compliments. He saw how Brandon's ambition never quite matched his ethics. Inside the folder were 4 documents, all still crisp, notarized, signed, tethered to a plan we once built on love and caution. A clause that froze all distributions if any party attempted to assume legal control over my assets prematurely. A directive naming Lucinda Hartwell as the emergency trust attorney. A letter Lester wrote me, hand-signed in blue ink. And a note I had written myself but never sent. To Samantha. I didn't read it, not yet. I just tucked it back where it belonged. Tonight wasn't for grief. Tonight was for memory and action. I picked up the old landline, the kind that still made a satisfying click when you hung up. Lucinda's office line had changed, but her personal number hadn't. She answered on the second ring. "Helen?" Her voice was older now, raspier, but solid. "It's time," I said. She paused. "I figured when I saw Brandon and Samantha at First Trust Bank on Wednesday." "You saw them?" "They were asking about irrevocable access. I pretended not to notice. But I made a note." Typical Lucinda. Never confrontational, but always precise. "I need to activate the clause," I said, "and I'll need a new document drafted." "What kind?" "Something that reminds them who raised them, and who remembers." We spoke for 20 minutes. Nothing dramatic, just legal terms, calendar appointments, verification steps. When I hung up, it was past 10 p.m. I poured myself a glass of the red wine I kept for guests, lit the lavender candle I usually saved for Sundays. Then I sat at the kitchen table, not to plan revenge, but to reclaim my name in ink. They thought I would forget. They thought old meant soft, that the woman who gave could never say no. They forgot I had watched a man die slowly over 3 winters without losing my mind, that I raised a child while nursing another, that I buried dreams without burying myself. No, Helen Whitmore wasn't done. She just hadn't spoken yet. They came 2 days later, not with flowers, not with soup, not even with their daughter. Just a leather folder, tight smiles, and too much cologne. I had baked banana bread, not because I wanted to, but because I knew Samantha couldn't resist commenting. She still remembers your banana bread, doesn't she? She'd say that. And she did, right on cue. I wore my softest cardigan, let my gray roots show a little more than usual, even slipped on my old slippers, the ones Lester used to tease me about. I wanted to look forgettable, soft, small. I made chamomile tea, oversteeped it, and when they settled into the armchairs, I shuffled around slowly, just like they imagined I'd move at 70. Truth is, I dance better now than I did at 40, but they'd never ask. Samantha opened the leather folder. I could see the documents, even upside down. Power of attorney. Durable. Immediate. She cleared her throat like she was about to deliver a eulogy. "Mom," she began, "we've been thinking it's time to take some of the burdens off your shoulders." I blinked slowly. Burdens? Finances, Brandon cut in. You shouldn't have to worry about bills, accounts, all that stuff. I looked at my chipped mug, then back at them. "So, you'd like to help?" "Yes, exactly," Samantha smiled. "If you just sign these, we'll be able to make sure everything's managed smoothly." I picked up the pen they placed next to the folder. A gold rollerball, cheap-looking, despite the effort. My hands trembled, just a little, theatrically. I tapped the pen on the table, then stared at the space where they wanted my signature. And I asked, "Where do I write my name again?" My memory's not what it used to be. Brandon smiled too widely. "Right there, Mom. Bottom line. That gives us the ability to make decisions on your behalf." "Decisions?" I echoed. He nodded, like paying bills, moving investments, or, estate planning. I nodded, waited 3 long seconds, then leaned forward. And in the softest voice I could manage, I said, "Oh, so it's true." Samantha froze. "What's true?" "That I'm now an inconvenience with a balance sheet." She flinched. Brandon frowned. "Mom, don't start this." I smiled gently. "Start what, dear?" Samantha tried to soften again. "We're just trying to help. This is normal. Most elderly people have their children assist." "Elderly people who ask," I interrupted. "But I didn't ask, did I?" There was silence. Not dramatic, just awkward. And into that silence, I slid across the table. Another folder. Blue, stiff. Lucinda's handwriting on the corner. Confidential. H.W. They didn't touch it. "Lucinda's still practicing law," I said. Funny thing. Lester made sure of that. Brandon paled. "What's this?" I leaned back. "You came with a pen. I came with memory. Let's see whose signature holds up in court." Samantha's voice cracked. "You're not serious." But I was. "You saw me as old. You saw my hesitation as decline, my silence as forgetfulness." I folded my hands neatly. "But you forgot what I remember. Every deposit, every promissory note, every tuition I paid, every last-minute bailout you never called gratitude." I stood up, no trembling now, walked slowly to the sink, rinsed my cup. Now, I said, if you'd like some banana bread to go, you're welcome. But if you leave that folder here again, I'll have Lucinda draft an addendum stating that you attempted financial coercion. Brandon clenched his jaw. Samantha looked like she might cry. I didn't offer a napkin, just a silence that didn't need translation. They left 5 minutes later. No hugs, no goodbye. And on the way out, Samantha tripped slightly on the welcome mat. The same one I used to shake clean every Sunday morning, before they told me I should consider assisted living. I never had to raise my voice, because when a woman remembers everything, she never needs to shout. The next morning, the phone rang at 9:07 a.m. I was trimming my lavender, the old kind Lester used to call too floral. Funny, I grow it now like armor. Mrs. Lowry? It was Martin, the manager at the community bank I'd been with for 38 years. His voice was taut, polite. We received a request yesterday, urgent access to your trust account and certificate titles, filed by a Mr. Brandon Cole. Pause. We denied it. As per standing instructions, all changes require 2 verbal verifications and confirmation from legal counsel. That didn't happen. I let the silence sit. Martin knew what it meant. Thank you, Martin, I said simply. And Martin. Yes, ma'am. Please note this in my record. Attempted breach logged. Do not contact any party but myself or Lucinda Halberd, counsel of record. Understood, Mrs. Lowry. I hung up, closed the shears, and I smiled. Not a triumphant smile, not a bitter one, but the smile of a woman who just finished sealing the last envelope. Lucinda arrived at 11. She always wore navy and walked like a woman with too many files in her head. I offered tea. She declined. Straight to business. I filed the addendum, she said, and the transfer clauses have been amended accordingly. I nodded. And the alternate guardian clause? Lucinda smiled this time. Signed, sealed, notarized. She slid a copy across the table. Clean white pages, my signature below hers, a new living will, and a trust update. Effective immediately, all remaining assets, including my estate, pension, lake house, and inheritance from Lester, would bypass Samantha and Brandon entirely. Instead, it would seed the Alexa Lowry Empowerment Foundation. Restricted until she turns 25, tied to academic or creative pursuits, guarded by a board of 3. Lucinda, Dorothy, my neighbor, and Mr. Kempler, Alexa's piano teacher. Samantha and Brandon wouldn't get $1. Not because I hated them, but because I finally saw them clearly. Lucinda sipped water. Do you want me to inform them legally or let them find out eventually? I paused, then answered quietly, let them be surprised, like I was. I stood and walked to the piano. Alexa's drawing still stood on the shelf, the one from the party. 4 people in the backyard, 3 on the picnic blanket, 1, me, outside the white picket fence, looking in. I had stared at it that night, wondering if she'd meant it that way. Now I understood. Children often tell the truth, accidentally. Lucinda rose. We walked to the door. She turned and looked at me, her voice softer. You could have fought harder. You could have screamed. You didn't. I smiled gently, because that would have made me like them. As she left, I glanced toward the cupboard, where Lester's old chess set still sat, dusted weakly. They thought I was the pawn, but I was always the queen, quiet, strategic, one move at a time. That night, I made tea, set aside a lemon square for Alexa, and wrote a letter, in cursive, she'd one day learn to read fluently. Darling girl, You saw something at 8 that most people don't see until 80. This isn't just about money. It's about knowing when something is yours to protect. One day, you'll understand everything I didn't say aloud. But for now, just remember, you are the reason I walked away early. So one day, you could walk in strong. It was Samantha who came first, not Brandon. She arrived alone 2 days later. No makeup, no earrings, no heels. She brought soup. Chicken and orzo, she said, placing it on the table like it was peace. I nodded, polite, pulled 2 spoons, sat across from her in silence. We ate in near silence. Just the ticking of the old stove timer, just the sound of porcelain tapping, and then quietly, "Mom," her voice cracked. I didn't know how to say it before, but I need to say it now. I didn't speak. Let her fill the void. I only wanted to help. You were getting older. You lost track of your bills that 1 week. The fridge was empty that month, don't you remember? And Brandon, he just thought we could make sure things didn't spiral. I turned my spoon in the bowl slowly. Her words sat like too much salt in broth. I had lost track of my bills 1 week because I was at the hospital with Dorothy. And the fridge had been empty because I was fasting for a minor surgery. But I said none of that. Instead, I asked, "And did I ask for help?" Samantha blinked. Did I say, "Please sign for me, speak for me, decide for me"? No, she whispered. But we were worried. I nodded. Worrying is not consent. She looked down. Her nails were chipped. The first time I'd ever seen her that way. Then, almost too quietly to hear, "We thought we could fix it later. Once it was all settled. Once you were in assisted living." There it was. The real plan, the relocation, the cleanup of Helen Lowry from her own life. I leaned back, not angry, not triumphant, just tired. "Samantha," I said slowly, "helping someone, real help, begins with respect, and respect begins with asking." She bit her lip. Tears slipped down. "I'm sorry, Mom." I reached across, took her hand, let it sit there, cold and trembling. "I believe you're sorry," I said, "but being sorry doesn't undo what was intended." Silence again, but a different kind this time. Heavy, human, real. She looked around the kitchen, at the floral curtains she once helped me hang, at the chair where her father used to read the newspaper. "You're giving it all to Alexa, aren't you?" I nodded. Yes, but not for revenge, for preservation, for someone who saw the danger and warned me. Samantha looked up, startled. "You mean she knew?" She whispered it to me at the party, 8 years old, and wiser than all of us. Tears welled in her again, but I didn't comfort her this time. That would be a mercy she hadn't earned, yet. "Brandon's going to be furious," she said softly. "Let him be," I replied. Anger reveals who someone is when control slips from their hand. She stood after that. No hug, no offer to stay. Just one question at the door. "Is there anything I can do to fix this?" I looked at her for a long time. Her eyes were like mine. Years ago. "Yes," I said. "You can live better than this. Not for inheritance, not for forgiveness, but for your own child. So she never learns to manipulate, only to love." She nodded, then left, quietly, just like I had. Brandon didn't knock. He barged in. The old screen door slammed against the frame with a clap that echoed down the hall. "Where is it?" he snapped. No greeting, no hello, Mom, no sorry, just possession. As if I were the one trespassing in my own kitchen. "Where is what?" I asked calmly, still slicing apples for my tea tart. He stared at me like I'd grown horns. "The new will. Samantha told me. You moved everything to a trust? For Alexa. She's 8. I looked up, not with anger, with precision. She's the only one in this family who told me the truth. Brandon scoffed. The truth? She's a child, Mom. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She knew enough, I said, placing the apple slices in the tray like quiet armor. Knew enough to pull me aside. Knew enough to whisper what neither of my grown children had the courage to say aloud. His jaw clenched. I can contest it, he barked. I will contest it. You're not thinking straight. I wiped my hands on the apron, walked to the drawer, pulled out a folded document, set it between us. You're welcome to try, I said, tapping the top corner. But you'll find this has already passed review. Lucinda filed everything through probate court last night. Every step was witnessed. Every signature recorded. He didn't touch the paper. He didn't need to. He knew Lucinda was Lester's lawyer for 40 years. He knew she didn't make mistakes. What are you doing, Mom? He whispered now. This isn't like you. I smiled, sadly. It wasn't like me, until it had to be. He stepped closer, voice lowering. You really want this? To go down as the woman who gave it all away to a child? That made me pause, not because I doubted myself, but because of the irony. Brandon, I raised you. I paid your tuition. I signed the loan for your first home. I let you name this house after your father. I stood between you and every mistake you could have made. I met his eyes. But I never taught you gratitude, and that was my failure. He looked down. For once, he had nothing to argue. So yes, I continued, if I leave this life remembered as the woman who gave everything to a little girl who still knows how to whisper warnings, then I'll have done one thing right. His voice cracked. And us? Me and Samantha? You're cutting us out completely? No, I said quietly. I'm letting you go. You cut yourselves out the moment you saw me as a wallet, not a mother. Silence, sharp, final. You said you didn't want revenge, he whispered bitterly. I nodded. This isn't revenge. This is protection. He walked out. No slamming this time, just the sound of a man who realized he was no longer in control. Later that night, I sat in the kitchen, alone. The house creaked, the tea kettle hissed, and Alexa's painting, the one with me standing outside the fence, still hung above the piano. I looked at it a long time. Then I took it down, turned it over, and wrote 5 words in permanent ink. She saw me. I stayed. That was enough. That would be my legacy. I didn't throw a party. I didn't make a phone call. I just bought a new pair of gloves and walked into Lester's old garden. August's sun brushed over the back fence. The hydrangeas had nearly wilted. The roses had grown wild, and the birdbath was choked with leaves, like no one had noticed anything at all. But I noticed, because this was where Lester used to hum when he worked, and now it was mine. I began with the small patch under the window, the rosemary, the lavender. Kneeling down, I ran my fingers through the cracked soil. There was something sacred in the way old roots still remembered where to grow. I didn't cry. I just breathed. One breath for each time I had stayed silent. One breath for each time I had chosen peace instead of proof. And one for each version of myself I had buried over the years. When I stood back up, dirt streaked down my arms. But my spine was straighter than it had been in years. That afternoon, the mail came. I almost ignored it. Most letters now were just catalogs or insurance reminders. But one envelope caught my eye. Small. Pink. No return address. But in the corner, a sticker of a sunflower. I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper, lined with doodles. Alexa's handwriting, messy, tilted, but hers. Dear Grandma, Mommy and Daddy are really mad. But I'm not. I saw you were sad and I didn't want you to be. I love the house. I love your garden. I want to help you plant flowers when I'm older. I think you're brave. Thank you for always saving me cookies. Love, Alexa. I sat very still. I placed the letter on the windowsill above the sink, right next to Lester's old radio. It hummed faint static when I turned it on, as if even the air remembered something about us. The next morning, I made a lemon tart, Alexa's favorite. No one came to eat it. And that was okay. I wrapped it in foil, labeled it with a sticky note. For Alexa, when she visits. Outside, the garden shimmered. I trimmed the roses back into shape. I scrubbed the bird bath. I left the old white rocking chair under the oak tree, the same one where Lester had read his paper every Sunday. And then I planted something new, a small white hydrangea, right in the center of the yard. I named it Gratitude. Not because it was owed, but because, finally, it was understood. Alexa may not inherit millions, but she will inherit something better, a legacy that saw her, believed her, trusted her, because she did the one thing no one else in that house did. She listened. And me? I didn't win a war. I just ended one, quietly, in my garden, with lemon tart on the counter and a letter taped above the sink. The fence is still there, but I'm no longer standing outside it. This is my home, my soil, my season. And this time, I bloom too. People think losing money is the worst thing that can happen. They're wrong. What you truly lose, quietly, painfully, is the belief that you matter to the people you once built your life around. That's what I almost lost. But not anymore. A week after the party, I got a call from Samantha. I didn't answer. 2 hours later, Brandon sent a text. We didn't mean to hurt you. Can we talk? I left it unread, because sometimes silence is the most honest answer. And sometimes the only way to break a cycle is to stop spinning inside it. Lucinda, my late husband's lawyer, came by for tea that Sunday. She brought a copy of the revised trust paperwork. Signed, sealed, witnessed. Every asset, every acre, every account now directed toward a trust for Alexa. Until she turns 25, it will sit untouched, just like the jar of lemon cookies on my shelf, waiting patiently for the right hands, the clean hands. As Lucinda stirred her tea, she looked at me and said, "You didn't just protect your money, Helen. You reclaimed your worth." I didn't reply. I just nodded, because she was right. This was never about wealth. It was about memory, dignity. It was about choosing, for the first time in my 68 years, who I wanted to be loved by, and how I wanted to be remembered. I stood by the kitchen window after she left. Outside, the hydrangea I'd planted was catching morning light. Gratitude was already blooming, faster than I expected. In my hallway now, above the shoes and scarves, there's a frame. Inside it, Alexa's letter. The sunflower sticker still stuck to the edge. Next to it, I've placed something new. A photograph. Not of my children, not of Lester, but of my garden, freshly pruned with my rocking chair under the oak tree. A quiet kind of proof that I'm still here, that I still grow. I didn't confront. I didn't scream. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped handing matches to people who never once lit a candle for me. And now I sleep better. Because I didn't lose my family. I simply discovered the one member who still knew how to love without strings attached. Alexa doesn't know everything yet. She's only 8, but one day she'll understand. Why Grandma left the party early. Why? Grandma smiled as she walked away. Why Grandma never once asked to be invited again. And maybe, years from now, she'll tell someone, my grandma didn't fight. She didn't shout. She just chose herself. And that changed everything. So, if you're still listening, let me ask you something. Is it really loss when what you walk away from never valued you to begin with? I didn't lose a thing. I simply reclaimed something I'd forgotten I was worthy of. The right to be loved. Without conditions. What about you? Have you ever had to walk away from family just to feel whole again? Do you believe we can choose who becomes our true family? Leave a comment below. Let's talk about it. Together. Because healing doesn't need applause. Sometimes, it only needs soil, sunlight, and the courage to bloom, even if no one's watching.